All right. Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for this month's Digging In with TPS Southern Region at Middle Tennessee State University. We are super excited about this month's webinar to be able to highlight three of the projects that have just completed work for the TPS Southern Region, for them to be able to share some of their experiences and about some of the successes that they had along the way. Before we kind of jump into that, a couple quick things. One, of course, be sure to check out the album for all of our newsletters and digging in episodes on the TPS Teachers Network. You can access that even if you are not a member of the TPS Teachers Network using the link or the QR code here. But we do, of course, encourage you to join the TPS Teachers Network. Within the Southern region, we share lots of resources and of course, all of our partners share information about their projects. And then there are tons of other great resources. And it's a wonderful community for people who are using primary sources in their work. One other piece of information that we want to share is that there are some new funding opportunities available through the TPS Southern region. We have a small pool of funds where we will be awarding a few sub-awards that for projects running from July through December 15th of this year, 2026. So if you have a project that you would like to talk with us about, we encourage you to go to our website at mtsu.edu/TPS and look for that apply for a grant link there. And you can find more information about the process as well as the notice of intent form, which is the first step to applying for a project. We will also be accepting notices of intent for projects starting for 2027. So again, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions about that. But we are looking forward to seeing what new ideas people have for fabulous projects that we can help to support. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Dr. Stacey Graham, to kind of get into the content for this month.
Thank you, Kira. I am going to share my screen so we can all take a look at this month's newsletter. And we are going to hear from, in just a few minutes, our project partners who are all working on projects that incorporate various aspects of civil rights history into their work with teachers and students and the public. And so we decided that we would make that the theme of this month's newsletter. And this is a topic that we have dealt with very much, very often in the past in developing materials that we have available from our TPS Southern Region website. And so we just kind of plucked a few of those highlights out of our website and put those on the first page here that if you're kind of looking for a one-stop shop on some very kind of broad civil rights primary sources and materials, you can start here. We've got a whole tab of civil rights lesson plans. So for instance, I'll just show you this. These are our tabs where our lesson plans are organized. And so if you click on civil rights, you'll see that we have quite a number of those. And so then we have a couple primary source sets. This is because we had teacher institutes on these topics several years ago, and we developed these along with those events. We have a couple close reading exercises as well. If you're looking at the Brown v. Board unanimous decision from the Supreme Court, as well as Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail, we have something you can use with your students in the classroom on that, looking at reading text. So, and then of course on the front page, I have this wonderful image from Birmingham, Alabama, 1963, which ties into one of our projects. But I love the way it shows that it's not just people that everyone's heard of who made this movement possible. It is so many more everyday people just doing the work day in, day out. And here we have a bunch of women just writing letters. This is what it looked like. Not the big, well, of course, the big speeches were a part of it, but this is what the meat of it looked like. And I think that might connect with a lot of your audience. So we also, on the last page, have a lesson idea that looks at Katherine Dunham, who is a very famous and should be even more famous African American dancer, choreographer, anthropologist, ethnographer, scholar, just and civil rights activist, all in one. Very interesting person. And Ashli found some great resources on looking into her life and connecting that to the civil rights movement that she'll talk about at the end of our episode. So the three special guests that we have with us today, I'm just going to go through in order in which they appear in the newsletter. This is not any specific order, it's just the order in which I happened to put the different Q&As in. So first we have Mike Santrock, who is the archivist with the Fulton County Schools Archives and Teaching Museum, and the collections managers there as well in Atlanta, Georgia. And if I got any of that incorrect, I'm sorry, and you'll have to correct me. But this is a really interesting how you all, like the school district has its own archives and museum dedicated to teaching history. So that's something that I kind of wish we had here in Tennessee. So he talks about their project on page 1 and then page 2. And then our next, I'm sorry, page 2 and page 3. Our next project that we highlight is Dr. Christina Thomas, the civil rights historian and community archivist with the Mississippi Humanities Council. And she talks about her project with Mississippi National History Day program with the Youthful Offenders Unit School at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. And this is just one of those projects that will lift your heart, no matter who you are, just reading about how the participants in this project have been just moved and have connected to these sources. And some of those quotes are here as well. I hope you all read them. And then our third featured project is Kids in Birmingham, 1963. And of course, the title of the project is Making It Easy for Teachers of All Subjects to Apply Primary Sources in Teaching Civil Rights History. And the director of Kids in Birmingham 1963 is Ann Jimerson. And she is also with us here today. And so that the last Q&A is about her project. And so I would like to stop sharing my screen here for a moment and turn it over to our three special guests. And just to make it not awkward, I'll call on you individually at first, just so you have a chance to tell us a bit more about what your project, I know they're all coming to an end right now, so what your project did in this past funding cycle, and kind of what the goals were and what the outcomes were. So we'll start off with Mike. You have to unmute yourself, Mike.
Yeah, that helps.
All right. The
Thank you
mute
for
ice has been broken.
thank you for the introduction, first of all, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk about our project. So our project is called Untying the Knot of Segregation, engaging students with local and national stories through primary sources. And it's actually an extension of a larger project we've been doing for a few years here called Project Untying the Knot. So yes, as I was introduced, you got a good context of where I work. I actually work in a public school system that has its own archive that preserves its history of the school system going all the way back to 1871, which of course historians, most people will know, is the Reconstruction era. So we have primary sources in our own local repository that covers our local history and the communities of Fulton County, which surround Atlanta, Georgia. So it's rich in those community histories. What we don't have is what the Library of Congress provides us with, these national themes that have to do with the civil rights movement, and these national primary sources that are more universal. Um, but anyway, the goal of our project was to use primary sources from our archive and combine them with primary sources from the Library of Congress and kind of dig into our local history where it pertains to our school district desegregating. And so we have a really good lens at how a southern school district navigated that and actually delayed the process of integrating until it became necessary by rule of federal government. So we've created different platforms for this project. One is a documentary, which covers a some high school students who are actually protesting the closing of their school, which was closed during integration in a black community. And the students rallied around that. So we created a film as part of Project Untying the Knot. We also have a physical exhibit that our students can benefit from coming to our teaching museum and seeing. And we also have a online learning course, and that's where this grant-funded project came in, is to employ several of our district social studies teachers to create innovative ways to get this content out to our students over the learning platform called Canvas, which many colleges and school districts are using right now. So that was our overall goal, and I feel like we've done a great job. We came up with more lessons than we actually aimed to create in the beginning. So there's a sort of roundup of how what our project is.
Thank you so much, Mike. Um, Dr. Thomas, you're next. Would you like to tell us about how your project went?
Yeah, so thank you all so much for bringing us together. The project is actually in its third iteration. So, for the last 3 years, I've been teaching civil rights history and prepping students for National History Day at the youth school at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility. And so, this really came directly from feedback from students that they wanted more resources and that there was just a greater need as they're building their national History Day projects. And so this grant was ideal because it brought resources from the Library of Congress digital collection, and the students don't have access to technology, so there was ways to pull together primary source booklets on various topics as it related to largely the Mississippi movement. But through the booklets as well, some students were introduced to figures like Claudette Colvin, pursued projects on individuals like that. So it wasn't just Mississippi based. There was a little bit of other Southern civil rights figures who were also focused on for their various projects. So the goal of the course was to, of course, teach students lessons in civil rights histories, particularly the Mississippi movement and these lesser known figures that we think about beyond this dominant narrative of the civil rights movement. But it was also just to help students. For many of them, it was their first time doing a project on this scale. So just to gently encourage them to pursue original history projects, to learn how to analyze primary sources, and to use these to come up with a historical argument that's also, supplemented by these claims and evidence that they have to also help them with public speaking. So that was part of, their regional competition was presenting their boards in front of judges. And so yeah, so it wasn't just teaching history, but helping them to, pursue a history project and, have that confidence and feel empowered, to do this work. Um, so a little bit about the class too. We had about 5 facilitators. So it's myself, Michael Morris, who's the director of the two Mississippi Museums, Albert Sykes, who's the executive director for the Institute for Democratic Education in America. And then we also had myself and then two professors from Jackson State who were also assistant, Professor Ori in the political science department and Mark Jow, an art professor who's also chair of the art department, who's helping them to, creatively think about and visualizing what their projects could look like. And so we had about 12 students participate in a regional competition at the prison. 4 of them were selected to advance to the state competition where we were given 3 awards for 2 students' projects, which was really exciting because they were able to fully participate in the state competition this year.
That's great. That's great. Thank you for that. And so now I'm going to ask Ann Jimerson to tell us about Kids in Birmingham.
Thank you, Stacy. And Dr. Thomas, you should know that we got our start as a small organization giving interviews for students who are doing their National History Day projects. So
Oh.
anytime you want to call on one of us, let us know. We are, as Kids in Birmingham 1963, we are a group of Blacks and whites who grew up apart from each other in Birmingham in the 1960s. We've told our stories in text and sometimes in oral history and different ways, and we make ourselves available to students and teachers and authors and the media. So Kids in Birmingham 1963 started just as an online repository for stories, making these connections with media and other people. But we decided pretty early on that we wanted to branch into something that would help us give back to Birmingham. Many of us now live across the US, and we wanted to focus on reconciliation and education. So when we formed the education team, we quickly made a goal, which was to motivate Birmingham area schools, so a geographically focused area, to prioritize the teaching of Alabama civil rights history. We were pretty sure that it was not getting taught very thoroughly or even at all in some cases. And we reached out to other organizations and interviewed a lot of stakeholders to figure out what kind of role we could play. In the end, we formed the what's now called the Alabama History Coalition, because we realized that there were a lot of people that wanted to teach this history and needed support from one another. We also, in that process, collected, we now have 16 co-sponsors of the coalition, and many of them are organizations like ours that are sort of the makers. You know, we make lesson plans, or we offer field trips and that kind of things to schools, but we were finding that uptake was pretty low. So what we've done is moved ahead on many fronts for this particular project, which, as Stacy told you, is called Making It Easy. Making it easy for teachers of all subjects to apply primary sources in teaching civil rights history. So there are a lot of parts here. We brought in two of the other co-sponsor groups from the coalition, Bending the Arc and Sandpiper Advisory Group, because we had already worked together in different ways, but this kind of solidified our relationship with one another. And for Kids in Birmingham 1963, we continued a project we had started with other funding, Civil Rights History School-wide, where we encourage local teachers to develop their own lesson plans and implement them, pilot them. And they were originally required to use one of our primary sources, one of our stories. And with this project with TPS, we've added Library of Congress material as well. So we had 3 teachers working with us this year. We also use some of the funds to enhance a new website that our organization is going to have. And one of my favorite parts was a process that we hired some teachers over the summer, and we'll hire them back again this summer, that we're calling school liaisons. And these are people who can make visits with educators, really begin to understand what the educators' priorities and needs are, and let them know what's available to them, because they don't know many of the materials and field trips that are available. So these school liaisons have been kind of an experiment for us. We want to see if we could achieve large-scale change, really system change in how this history is taught. And we think this is one of the tools that could prove to be very useful. And sure enough, with funding from TPS, we were able to see that it could work. We learned a lot about what's needed and what could happen. So they've set up these continuous feedback loops between the maker organizations and the schools to figure out how we could all benefit. In addition, Bending the Arc is a group that their director, Pam Powell, is a very talented filmmaker who had already made 2 full-length documentaries on the topic of the civil rights struggle in Alabama. and she's interviewed over 150 people in full-length oral histories. But we realized again that probably a documentary film was not the way to go for classrooms. So we've encouraged Pam to create a number of themed short video clips and reels that pull together oral history with primary sources in the B-roll. And those are turning out beautifully. We've already put one to use in one of the classroom projects that we had. And Sandpiper teamed with Bending the Arc to conduct two oral histories, one with Charles Malden, who happened to be the keynote speaker at the NCHE conference recently, and Paulette Roby, who was a local foot soldier in Birmingham. So we have those done and also illustrated with B-roll from the Library of Congress and other sources. And finally, just last week, Sandpiper conducted a professional development session called Forged in Alabama, Untold Stories for America's 250th. So it's been a busy project, lots of things going on, but we're finding that the elements are coming together and we're making some progress in getting this education into local schools. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I want to repeat, we don't say this enough, but we do think it all the time. We feel it's a real privilege to be able to work with projects such as yours that are doing such great work. And every time we hear you all tell us again what you're doing, even though we know, we're like, we tell each other, wow, we're funding some really great projects. And so, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we said that out loud sometimes. And we will be saying that out loud plenty of times next week at our first regional conference in Nashville, where you will all be talking about these again, but with everybody together. And so let's focus just for today on the civil rights aspect of these projects. And so I am totally fine with you all taking this conversation in whatever direction you want, but I thought I would go ahead and ask a directed question that you can answer in whatever order. You don't have to go in the same order. But I'm curious because you all have such really wonderful local history stories that you bring in. That you then connect to larger national themes that you find through the primary sources of the Library of Congress website. Now, of course, we talk about the national themes of the Library of Congress primary sources, but I mean, it's also true that every single one of those primary sources is local to somebody. So we might look at an image of Martin Luther King Jr. and think, oh, well, that's the national story, but he was part of so many local stories as well. And so I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit more about how you combined and made work together your local stories as well as the Library of Congress stories.
Speaking for our project, it was very important to us. Well, we know that the civil rights can be, for an educator, can be challenging to teach, of course. So we kind of wanted to rely heavily on the primary sources, right, wherever they came from, because those are things that can be analyzed and not argued with. But when we sat down for this project in general, we wanted to take into consideration what some historians call the long civil rights movement, right? Which goes all the way back to when our school system was founded, even before that, but it matches up very well with Reconstruction. So for us, that foundational Plessy versus Ferguson. I'm thinking of the collection, the curated collection Brown at 50 from the Library of Congress, the Civil Rights Act of 1964. All these are part of the long civil rights movement and factored really well with the primary sources, of course. And then we get down to using our local repository, but also other local repositories around here, some newsreel footage of certain events that happened in our county during desegregation. So for us, it was like a puzzle. The pieces just fit. One supported the other, which supported the other. That was kind of seamless. That was our experience.
Yeah, and so for our project too, with the focus being on the Mississippi movement, it was sort of what were talking about at the beginning, is just combining what we have locally, but then also with the Library of Congress sources. So one of the things I'm thinking about immediately was this oral history booklet I compiled, which talked about the murder of Emmett Till. And so to pull together for students these oral histories, have them read them out loud. But then also, I'm a community archivist with the Freedom Information Service Library. And so, this is a civil rights veteran in Mississippi who has been curating and preserving civil rights materials since 1965. And because I'm in an archival position there and it's a community-based archive, I can bring some of those materials into the classroom so students can actually physically engage with some primary sources as well. And so, yes, so they're, reading these oral histories. They're looking at some newspapers that we got pulled from the Library of Congress, chronicling America newspaper database, but then also reading some of the other reports of other murders that happened in 1955, like Reverend George W. Lee in Humphreys County, Mississippi, Lamar Smith. And so one student, he was doing research on Medgar Evers. So I was able to pull that field report from 1955 of Medgar Evers doing his own, investigation and research on these murders as well. So it was pulling all these sources together for students to help them, build projects that are also competitive with other students who have access to a larger scale of materials than they do.
I'll go ahead and say that, of course, while Birmingham was a very local civil rights action, it also was very nationalized. So, of course, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and many from the SCLC were there. So we were able to fold in some of those pictures. And I guess even figures like Fred Shuttlesworth, though he often is not known outside Birmingham, there are images of him and footage from him in the Library of Congress. And then Pam in her films, because these were thematic, they were on things like specific things like segregated hospitals or trying to look at resilience, stories of resilience and close Black communities. The title of it was Close Black Communities in Segregated Birmingham because the oral histories that she'd collected were from people from Birmingham. But many of the illustrations in the Library of Congress could fit in to photographic images that didn't have to be place specific.
All right, that's incredible that you all have such wonderful kind of sets and collections of primary sources on your own end. And and you are a kid in Birmingham, 1963, like, you're a primary source too. So I think that's really, it's really important that we capture those stories while we can. And okay, I don't really know how to word this, but something that Mike said made me think about this, where you mentioned, Mike, that one of the best ways to equip teachers to be able to teach the civil rights movement and other concepts like that in the classroom is through primary sources, where you can say, this is what happened, this is what these people said at the time. The fact that this happened cannot be disputed because here's a primary source, here's evidence. And so that's kind of what we had been doing with teachers as well, especially when different kinds of policies and legislative mandates make teachers afraid to teach a concept like this. And especially given what's going on in the country now, where learning about what happened in 1964 and 65 is right with us still. It's pretty incredible. So I'm wondering, like, if you could talk maybe about some of your challenges and getting people connected or getting people to work through their difficulties with a difficult topic. and maybe learn something new or open up their minds to a new way of thinking about it, whether it's just, learning how to analyze primary sources and realize, oh, I can come up with my own interpretation because these primary sources exist, or if it's, talking to people and maybe kind of inspiring them to action today. I realize that's a bit of an amorphous question, but go ahead and let me know kind of what kinds of present day connections you're making.
Yeah, I have two examples. One of the first one was thinking about I think it was an oral history booklet or maybe a primary source, a combination of both, on teaching about nonviolence philosophy. And so for the students, as we dived into Reverend James Lawson and this philosophy he's bringing forth, and Dr. King and this embrace of nonviolence, and watching some short like documentary clips as well after reading oral histories or looking through some of the training materials that they had. I think I did an activity. Well, imagine yourself, you're about to be on the front lines of the movement, and you're thinking through this nonviolent principle. And I remember one student said, I can't do this assignment because I he couldn't even wrap his mind around, you know, how to, how to face sort of police officers and people who are coming after your life with this philosophy of nonviolence. And it became a larger, conversation, with them as well about um, just the principles of the movement, but then also too talking about self-defense in the Mississippi movement as well. So looking at some of the work of Charlie Cobb as well, which was interesting to talk about too in the space we were in. But I think students really appreciated that they weren't the only ones wrestling with this principle or philosophy of nonviolence, that people on the ground as well were wrestling, and some people still chose to embrace a philosophy or a practice of self-defense as well. And I think another example that I was thinking of too is when we talked about the emergence of SNCC in Mississippi with the Macomb movement. And for them, primary sources, and I think this was my slip up at the beginning, it's that all true document. And they were reading the newspaper about the murder of Herbert Lee, where someone's like, no, this was a justified murder. The person was defending themselves, and so they got to see how newspapers and the stories produced were perpetuating a lie as well, and how primary sources don't always tell the truth. And so for them, it was a good activity to rewrite the newspaper based on, witness stories and things like that. And the memory of people like Bob Moses, and I think it was an activity from one of the larger like Civil Rights Institute as well, but helping them to think about primary sources not always being right and not always telling the truth, which was a very great activity for them as well.
Um, so the lessons that I was describing that are being created for this website, the website itself is a almost like a curated exhibit that a student will tour through with lessons attached that have been created through this grant. And one of the final section of this curated space is about civic participation. One of the and I'm speaking to those modern day connections, and to our students, the young people who will be adults. Um, we wanted to address that because the school that I was referring to earlier, the protest, there was a school named Eva Thomas High School, which was located in a Black community. And when the board decided to close that school to integrate and scatter that student population, the high school students, with support from community parents and even the NAACP, and rumor has it the Black Panther Party as well, they held a sit-in at their school, peaceful protest. And they actually were able to keep their school open by, through this protest for another year. Eventually, the court order desegregated it. And I'm saying all this to present this perfect local example of civic action from this community group. And we think it's a shining example for our students. And some of the primary sources that we encounter between the community and the board, the rhetoric, let's just say it's very similar to the type of rhetoric you're hearing from community and officials today. So I think that's also a lesson, right? Is that we've heard this, it could be on steroids, this negativity sometimes, but as a human condition, we've been in situations like this before. I would always want students to know that too. Um, and then lastly, one of the challenges with this modern connection is, challenging a school district to look at itself, to examine itself in one of its worst moments in a time that's very challenging to do that. So we had the support of our board using this material and this content, and I couldn't speak enough to those kind of partnerships in-house as much as the partnerships that we're sharing right now. So yeah, that's the best way I would have to speak to our experience with that question.
I was really fortunate last week. I live in Washington, D.C. and do most of my work virtually. But I had suddenly decided that I really wanted to be there to see Ashli's workshop that's part of this project. So I went to Birmingham last week. And then it turned out that I was going to be there on a day when I had the chance to visit a fourth grade classroom in a mostly white suburban school in Vestavia Hills, a suburb of Birmingham, that one of the teachers we were working with was conducting a civil rights lesson about the Children's Crusade of Birmingham. And I had helped line up two foot soldiers who were going to be able to join the class, one by Zoom and the other one in person. And so my focus was really on that. I thought I was just going to observe, but as Stacy pointed out, I also am a relic of, a primary source myself. So they had a lot of questions for me about what it was like to be the white daughter of a white civil rights worker at that time. And I was just blown away by what these students had accomplished by engaging with primary sources, because they had already been at this work for 2 or 3 weeks and had generated literally hundreds of questions from the primary sources that they wanted to ask once they had people in their presence. So that was, and a lot of the conversation was very emotion filled and brought to the present day for them. So these fourth graders were able to carry on really remarkable conversations and ask good questions and listen as their elders spoke to them.
That's incredible. I love hearing that there's so much hope for the future, and the impact that you've had to make that happen. So looking to the future, I guess my last question to set before you all would be kind of, what are the next phases of your projects, or what's the afterlife going to be? What are you thinking to do with it? What, are you fast at work coming up with another phase? Just tell me, how are you going to move this work into the future?
Well, I'll start this time. So one of our aims with this funding was to be able to really operationalize this idea of the school liaisons and this relationship building between schools and groups like ours to get this history into schools in a bigger way. And what we learned from this small amount of funding is that it can work. So we've already met several new teachers that we've recruited to join the school liaisons this summer. We're going to piece together funding wherever we can find it and try to get them paid their $40 an hour to do that work, and just build it out and grow it from there. So that's one aspect. The other is, now that we have these products, which really, well, the one on the hospital segregation already got used by the fourth graders, because when I heard that they had talked about that topic already, I said, oh, we have a clip for you. So it's also proving that by making classroom ready materials like short videos that combine oral history with primary sources, that we can readily respond to teachers' needs. So all of the projects that we're working on are growing and continuing. We have many more people whose stories we want to capture on film before it's too late for that. So we're just building and growing, and this was a step along the way that was really a big boost.
Um, yes, it was interesting. I just learned a few weeks ago that when, the Mississippi Humanities Council first started this program and partnership, and I joined in as the first instructor, that was only supposed to be a one-time class. But the impact that it had on the students was just was just too big to stop. And I think this year also proved it. And we were just very grateful for this funding to have 12 students participate, to see, the impact the class had. And I think I wrote in the newsletter, it sound too cliche that, history is actually, making a very profound, difference for them to be able to participate in History Day projects as well. And so we're just hoping to continue and offering these students this opportunity, to participate, to be a part of this competition, but to also continue to learn history as well. And so that's really what the future looks like. I'm toying with the idea of what it will be like for them to develop a civil rights exhibit at the school. Um, but then also, find instructors who can keep the momentum going as well. Just because I am a civil rights scholar, and my job is largely based in South Carolina, so the travel back and forth is just a lot. But continuing to find people who can keep the momentum of the class. But what this grant has done is already given a primary source booklets that can be used for years to come, that are in the library at the youth school, that students can constantly go back to as well to continue to engage with history.
Yeah, you know, it's our work going forward has already kind of started. We introduced the alum that I brought up a minute ago to the teachers on one of our early sessions in the grant period, and introduced them so that they could talk and chat and get to know each other before the teachers developed lessons about this content. So um, two of our 12 social studies TPS architects that came to work for us have decided to start keep doing an oral history series after the grant period's over, free of charge, I guess, but they're going to donate these oral histories to the archive. So we're having an oral history series continue already, uh, because of this project. But and I want to go back to that photo that you had in the newsletter of those, citizen soldiers doing that work. That's been kind of our goal, is to show our students and people in our county that that the civil rights a movement didn't just happen in those places that everybody identifies with, and they weren't just Rosa Parks and Dr. King, but um, there were people in College Park in your backyard, and I think that's a great connection for our students to realize that that these were that there was an army of people out there that you're just learning the size of that army by learning this. So. Um, And I said all that to say, so this is just one community's story, right? And it's about an African American community standing up for their rights. I can see in the future, we've built out lessons on this web platform. My ultimate goal, I would love to have students come in the future and start guiding their own community histories and adding those to the website. Up until about the 1970s, Atlanta was a very black and white city demographically. Since then, it's so international, it's so diverse. We have people from Southeast Asia, South and Central America, people from everywhere live here now. And I would love to see, as that diverse population is scattered throughout a really large county in a large metro area, students kind of, you know, um, research their own communities, do oral histories, and add those diverse stories to this community story. So I think that would be a great way to go in the future. Hopefully we can do that.
Thanks again. I really enjoyed hearing you elaborate on just the Q&As from the newsletter and these larger conversations, and we'll continue this conversation next week at the conference. So I want to thank you again, Mike Santrock, Christina Thomas, Ann Jimerson, for being with us today. And we are going to continue on with our theme of civil rights history by I'm going to turn it over to Ashli so that she can share with us her presentation on Katherine Dunham and some of the awesome Library of Congress primary sources that have to do with her.
Hi, let me just get my screen share on. Okay, sweet. So thank you everybody for your Q&A. It was really great. My lesson idea is Katherine Dunham celebrating Black culture through dance. So my inspiration for this was obviously the theme of civil rights. But also I have been trying to tie in dance to one of my lesson ideas ever since I started in this position. I have danced since I was classical ballet since I was 15, and I got really excited whenever I found Katherine Dunham because she is super cool and I'm really excited to talk about her. So I'm gonna jump in if my computer will let me. There we go. Okay, so I had a question. Oh, there's my question. Okay, so what forms of resistance to Jim Crow come to mind when you think of the civil rights movement? Can hop in the chat or in mute. Just
The lunch counters at Woolworths in Nashville and in Greensboro, North Carolina. So the
yeah.
students, like the college students.
The various marches and demonstrations that took place.
Think
Yeah.
of voting drives, I think of.
And young people involved.
Yeah. Those are great. That is what we typically think of. So another really, really big aspect of the civil rights movement is also this arts movement that comes with it. It's being able to express what's going on politically and culturally and personally um, through art. And with Katherine Dunham, it was through dance. So um, Katherine Dunham is recognized as the mother of modern dance. She was a leader in dance anthropology. She actually had a bachelor's, master's, and doctorate in anthropology from the University of Chicago. She was a dancer and a choreographer and a civil rights activist. So, she was really, really cool. So in 1931, she started the first Black ballet troupe in the United States. Um, because of segregation, there really wasn't like a public space for African American dancers to express their culture or even to um, learn dance professionally. So she gave them a space for that. Um, so Catherine studied, I mentioned she had an anthropology degree and was a leader in dance anthropology. Um, she got a Rosenwald fellowship to go study dance in the Caribbean. So she studied dance in the Caribbean and Africa, like cultural dances. And she while she was studying these, she was inspired to um respect the cultural aspect of the dance, but also she was wanting to bring it over to America and incorporate it into American dance and traditional or classical European ballet. Um, so this is what her dance troupe did is she was able to express like African dance, Caribbean dance, and create this beautiful culturally integrated space um, for African American dancers to perform and not only to do that, she also would in the like super segregated states. She would oftentimes refuse to perform or refuse to come back if the theater was segregated or if the theater did not have equal rights for both black and white people. Um, so she took took steps in all directions to resist Jim Crow and resist segregation. And yeah, and then I want to talk a minute about her legacy. So she lived for a very long time. Um, I want to say she was in her 80s or 90s. Um, and she started a technique school, which is really cool. I couldn't find any evidence that the school still exists today, but she inspired many other African American choreographers to start programs for Black students and like throughout the years and keep this like modern dance technique alive. And she also has a museum that is preserving her legacy in Illinois, that's doing many of the same things with equality and the arts. Um, so yeah, she's just a really cool person. So I want to move on to, I don't think I'm gonna have time to show the videos, so I'll just
Show us one
show
video.
one. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll show, I really like, where is it? I think it's this one. This is from her first ballet. It doesn't have sound. Um, if it will load. Should have had it pulled up.
Yeah, the Library of Congress website is just slow these days, just from volume. It's them, not you. You might have to refresh it though.
Let's try that. Is it gonna load? Please load.
While it's loading, I'll go ahead and talk about this one because I learned a lot from looking at Ashli's lesson idea. So the Lagya, which was like one of her ballets, that's actually based on a dance of that same name from like Haiti, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we go.
I found it. Maybe. Uh-huh.
I think the recording is actually much smoother and more analog than this. This is just a factor of the library loading very slowly today, which always happens while we're recording. Um,
It does look grainier than when I first the actual thing is.
yeah, you can get a sense of some of the movements, and of course, you can always just download the newsletter and go to Ashli's lesson idea and click on the links from there to view that one plus more.
Where I lost my PowerPoint. Sorry about that. So the idea behind the videos I have linked. Let's try this. Aha, there we go. So this first video is some of her field work from Haiti. And then the second video is the one we just watched from her ballet. And just having students watch these and compare and contrast them. So like where do you see the influence of the Haitian cultural dance in her work? And then I have a pas de deux from the same ballet, which is a partner dance between a man and a woman. Um, and then I have a pas de deux from the Nutcracker. Um, and really looking at her work and comparing it to like the Haitian movements. Where do you see that in the pas de deux? Where do you see like the classical European style in her work? Because she is a genius choreographer and melds all of these styles so beautifully. And then also, uh, just thinking about like the big picture questions too, like, what do you think it meant to be able to show Black culture on stage during this era? What do you think some of the fears and worries were when performing these pieces for a majority white audience? Um, what do you think some of the hopes for Black culture, civil rights, and integration were through dance? Like how were they displaying these things? Oh my goodness. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashli. Yeah, I agree with you. Such an interesting figure in American history, and I'm so glad that the Library of Congress has so many primary sources and a lot of those little clips from her ethnographic field work. I have some memory. I tried to find it the other day, but I couldn't, of watching some Haitian dance, and it looked like martial arts, and then there was some that looked like break
hmm
dancing, and I'm like, wow, here we think that we just invented everything in the United States, and this is it's cultural diffusion because of people being open and receptive and being scholarly about it. Okay, so that thank you for that, and that concludes this episode of Digging In. Thank you again for joining us. I'm actually going to turn it back to Kira for, I think we have what, a closing slide.
Yeah, so just a couple quick things to wrap us up. And let me, there we are. So, again, if listening to our partners today inspired some ideas, please check out information about applying for a grant from the TPS Southern Region. If you are interested in receiving PD credit for viewing today's webinar, you can also do that. You can access that form via the QR code here or the link, either one. And we generate those by hand, and then actually send those out about once a week. So if you complete that, you should get your form within a week. If you don't, just reach out to us and we will get that to you as soon as possible. And we hope that you'll join us again next month when we will be doing kind of a showcase about our regional conference. As Stacy mentioned, we are convening all of our wonderful partners and to highlight their projects next week in Nashville. And so we'll have some fun and exciting things to share from that in next month's session. You can, of course, always catch any of the episodes that you've missed on our YouTube channel, and we will be posting both on the TPS Teachers Network and on our Facebook page. So again, thank you guys so much. And to our partners, again, thank you guys. We really appreciate and love having you as part of today's session. Thanks.